bothered me. I think I was naive to the fact I felt invulnerable. I don't know. So when I came back, I felt like, all right, just like ready to go again. I didn't get enough. I wanted more. I wish I could have been there longer. So that's when I came home, and then the next deployment came on. And so there was a lot of us from the first deployment, and then some new guys that we met along the way that had been to Iraq before. And so we were all gung-ho about the second one. My friend Chapman, he got to go with us on this next one, so he had a lot of experience. We were all in the same platoon when we went over there. And that one was a little bit more difficult for me mentally. We did convoy security, and it was at night. We would drive down the middle of the road, like literally we would drive down the middle of the road, because if you were one side or the other and you got hit, you know, that blast would get you. So you would go on base, you'd go to where they were at, you'd pick them up, do all the paperwork. It's very thorough. You're not just picking up random people. All right, we got everybody. Sergeant Noor, go take your truck. Check trucks 1 through 5. So you check your trucks, you check your drivers off the manifest, make sure that they were who they were supposed to be. Then we'd take them, we'd go to the gate, and then they would have to go and say, this is our trip ticket with our vehicles and everything. There was an officer at the gate that would check it, and sometimes it'd be screwed up. And they'd say, nope, this is wrong. So they get stuck there, maybe like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That 30 minutes would turn into an hour. If we got cut off by another convoy, that would turn into 2 hours, and then our 3-hour drive would turn into like 5 hours or 6 hours. So it was pretty frustrating. Most of the time, your Uncle Zach and I were in the first gun truck. Steve Morrell, he was our driver. And so probability of us getting hit was more likely than anybody else, because you're the first vehicle, right? They see you coming and they can time it. But most of the time we were the scout vehicle, so we were pushed out a good 200 to 300 meters ahead of everybody else by ourselves. Not a good thing. And the vehicle we were in was called an ASV, or an armored security vehicle. And design flaw, the gas tanks were right in the front. So where I was sitting was right on top of the gas tanks. So if you were to get hit, those tanks would ignite immediately. And that happened quite a bit with those vehicles. And so you kind of knew your fate. Every night we would kind of go out and we'd joke. We'd make light of the situation, because it kind of helped us out. And I'd tell Steve and I'd tell Zach, and I'd be like, hey, don't worry guys, we've got a ring of Jesus fire around our vehicle. Nothing's gonna happen to us. You know, I'm gonna keep us safe. I got us. And so we would get stuck at the gate for like 30 minutes for paperwork. And then we'd come out, you know, and we'd do our weapons test. And then we're like, all right, let's go. And this is like a main highway, like anywhere, but we controlled the whole thing. And so as we're going down, we take that 90 degrees, we're going down the main highway, I can see another long convoy coming, and I'm like, we're gonna get cut off. And they're like, push it, try to cut them off. And we never made it. We'd always get cut off. So we'd stop, and then we'd fall behind this convoy, and we knew we were gonna get, you know, delayed a couple hours. So we'd fall behind them, and then 30 minutes later, kaboom, and then they would get blown up. They'd cut us off and they'd get blown up. That happened a lot. Probably like 5 times, you know, where I would be like frustrated. And then all of a sudden, you know, because we get cut off and then they get blown up in front of us. And I was like, holy crap, shoot, someone's looking out for me. You know, it kind of threw me off. And it wasn't just that. There's a backside to the base too. And there was one time we went off the backside, tried a different route to go faster, and we got cut off. And it was a route clearance team, and they shouldn't have been there. And it was. And it got blown up and it hit. But if they weren't there, it would have been me or Chapman behind us. There was one time where we were driving north to Spiker, and that's where a lot of the IEDs were at. I kept saying to Zach, I kept saying, hey, can you see him? Because he has to look out of this little porthole, because we were kind of going ahead. And he was saying, can't see them. But I thought he was saying, I can see them. Communication was bad with the combo. By the time we turned around, we were about a mile ahead of everybody else. Like, it was pretty scary. We just barely heard over the radio, like, truck 2's been hit, truck 2's been hit, and that was Chapman's truck. We didn't hear Chapman say it. We heard somebody farther back in the convoy. Vehicle 1, turn around, come back and pull security. So we turn around, and we were driving for like 3 minutes before we saw any other vehicles. And I was like, holy crap. Like, if that had been us, You know, we had to get hit, no one would have known for like 3 minutes. It would have been horrible. We drove right by it. And for some reason, either we were so far ahead, they didn't know what to think about us being a mile ahead of everyone else. But by the time Chapman's vehicle came along, they detonated on them. They lived. When we got to Spiker that night, we were all like, all right, we were all happy. All right, guys, you know, we're trying to like slap them on the back, like, you guys lived, holy crap. We kind of joke around with it. And I just remember seeing like their eyes were completely black, like dilated from the concussion, from the blast of it. And later we looking at it, it was like only like one pane of glass. These windows were like this thick. And there was like one pane of glass left before this piece of shrapnel almost hit Columbus. And then it gouged out Chapman's door pretty good. He got blown up quite a bit. He had got a lot of concussions. I think that's why he struggles with a lot of it. He deployed 2 more times after that deployment. There was one time when I ended up going to the hospital. We were running at night one time, and I was pretty fast back then, believe it or not. And so I was racing Columbus, and he was also young and fast. I was like, you don't know that we're taking a left. So I thought it was a round pole, but it wasn't. It was like a picket for hanging barbed wire, and it had a screw sticking out of it. So that's why I got that scar on my hands. I reached out, I grabbed it, right where the screw was at, like running full speed to swing on it. Anyway, ended up in the hospital. Talking to the doctor, he's cleaning my hand, and then a medevac comes in, and it was 2 soldiers. And they bring them in through the ER. You can hear the helicopter land, and they bring them in, and everyone's rushing in there. And they're kind of covered from head to toe in bandages. I can see their feet. Their feet are just bare, bloody. Doctor goes over there, and he comes back, and I said, what happened to them? He's like, oh, they got blown up in a convoy. Yeah, they got burned pretty bad. I was like, oh, are they going to make it? And he goes, well, we'll keep them alive until they can get back to the United States, but they're going to die. And he just said it like so bluntly, like the way I'm talking to you. And it was a shock. This reality set in, like, holy crap, like that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like witnessing my own death, laying on the bed across from me in the hospital. And even now, it's still, I can still feel it. It's like, that messed me up mentally, like pretty bad. Made it through the rest of that deployment. But when I came home, a lot of us had a hard time with that. One, because you expected to get hit, you kind of mentally prepared yourself constantly because you were driving at night and it was dark, you had no idea when or how you were going to get it, but you kind of mentally prepared yourself that you were going to get killed. And then seeing those guys in the hospital and getting cut off all the time and then surviving out of nowhere and like, what's going on, you develop something called survivor's guilt. Why did I live, but all these other soldiers died? I was like, what's my purpose? And I was questioning God and reality and all these things. And I didn't understand what my purpose was. We weren't told to go and talk about it. There was no therapy back then. So we drank. We got together and we drink. And that was our therapy. And we drank a lot. We'd drink until we'd fall asleep so that we didn't have to think about it. Well, guys weren't always there for each other. It's probably some of the lowest points in my life. And it was like I was practicing to do it. When it finally was time, I was ready to do it. And it was 3 months after we returned. It's like a counselor, it's almost like a college graduate, you know, and they go, how are you feeling? You know, and they ask you these questions and you check the box. And she said, how are you feeling? You know, and I just started bawling my eyes out because she wasn't equipped to actually deal with anyone's trauma and all these issues I had. Like, it finally came out. It's kind of what facilitated me to actually go get help. And I went to what they call the vet center because they were not required to release my medical records to the Army. So that way I wouldn't get stigmatized as having post-traumatic stress because it was seen as a bad thing at the time. I went there and I talked to somebody about 5 different times and I just tell them everything. That actually saved me. I didn't have to put my burden on or my mom or my dad or my friends, and I've never seen him again. Thank God for him, because if he didn't, I probably would have eventually killed myself. And I got help in Starheim, and he didn't get help.
John Starheim, he deployed with us in that second tour, and it was hard on everybody. Coming back, for some people, it was a little rough. John was going through a rough time, and he never let anybody know. He never told any of us. It wasn't until after the fact that we realized how bad it really was. And if he would have just told any of us, we would have helped him. He had odd jobs here and there, so he wasn't working regularly. He was drinking a lot. He was out of money. His girlfriend that he had stayed with during deployment left him. We were in the long-range surveillance company at the time. Most of the time we would see each other once a month, but sometimes we would get together and go out, And I remember the last time I saw him, you have to do mandatory training every year. And so the one that was that weekend was suicide awareness training. They called it ACE, Ask, Care, Escort. So we were watching a video and we were making fun of it. It was kind of what we did at the time. As guys, being macho. Yeah, whatever. You're weak if you kill yourself. Me, not so much, because I had just went through my own. Yeah, we went through it. And then I think it was that Wednesday, and get a phone call. And it was like, hey man, there's no easy way to tell you, but John killed himself this morning. And it was like, what? How the heck did that happen? You just, out of the blue. And it was shocking to me the most, because it's like we made it through Iraq and we never lost anybody, but we've been home for less than a year and we had lost somebody to suicide, and we were just kind of like at a loss of words. Then they asked for volunteers for his funeral because he was going to get buried with honors. So the way it goes is paratroopers bury paratroopers. So if you're an airborne unit, you have other members that were also airborne bury you. It's just tradition. So they asked for 6 people, well, more than 6 people, because you have 6 people that carry, and then you have people that are part of the 21 gun salute, and you have people that stand guard over the coffin during the ceremony. So that was my job as team leader at the time in E5. So Staff Sergeant Jones and myself were kind of there. I remember practicing for it. Everything in the military is like, if you don't do it, you get rusty, and if you've never done it, then you want to practice it over and over and over again, and we never practiced doing a funeral, and so we had to practice for hours and hours and hours to do it right, because it was for John, our last farewell to him, and we didn't want to do it half-assed. And I hadn't cried in a long time. And I remember, like, as I was going through it, it just kind of hit me, because most of the time we'd be out there going through this and John would be there, whether it was not training for a funeral, but any sort of training, and he'd be making jokes and he'd be cracking jokes and you'd see the smile on his face, and he wasn't there. You hold these things in for so long and all of a sudden they just spill out. I remember walking behind a Humvee and just kind of falling like into a cradle position, crying hard like a little kid, like weeping just uncontrollably. And it was just one of the few times in my life, I don't think I've ever cried like that again. And Jones came over and consoled me and stuff like that, and we got through it. From the funeral home, they had the pallbearers carry the casket out to the gravesite where they're going to bury it. They lay it onto the stand, and then you have 2 people, one at the foot and one at the head, and they stand there. And there's a flag draped over the coffin during the whole ceremony, and they give the prayers and the benedictions, and people say their words and things like that, and people are crying. Everyone is going through the suffering process, but you can't, and you have to stand there, and you have to be stone-faced, show no expression. And so Jones and I had to just stare while everyone's crying and sobbing and telling stories of John. And what I wanted to do most of all was be there with them and cry, but I couldn't. It was like the last thing I had to do for John was be a statue. I remember clenching my jaw so hard to hold back these emotions and these tears and these feelings, and I was like I was going to break my teeth. They give a command, Jones and I reach down, we grab the flag, we pull in a triangle. He inspects it, hands it off to the officer. Officer grabs it, turns, gives it to his mother. And he says, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for your son and his service. And she hands it to him. And we still couldn't show any emotion. We went on for that, but that was some of the hardest things I've ever done. Harder than going over to war was burying your friends. And it made me just realize that all of us were very susceptible from what we went through So you get there, it's a default setting. You know, I don't know if it's the war or Iraq or anything like that, but I don't know, life's just not the same. Life gets pretty tough. You could just turn it off and then it would all be over. And I don't know if other people think that, you know what I mean? But I think for some veterans, it's always in the back of their mind. And other people, especially those have been through those long nights in the convoys, questioning, you know, why am I alive? Why am I not getting blown up while people in front of me are cutting us off and they're getting blown up, you know? Or my buddies, you know, why are they dying? And when they come home, like, why can't they handle it? John was the first that I lost from suicide. His death led to a lot of other people I knew that were in the company kind of like declining after that. I know some of my other friends started getting addicted to painkillers, and then from painkillers it was on to heroin and hard drugs, and they went down a very bad path for a long time, and some of them never recovered. There was a guy, Lyle, that was on that deployment. He ended up killing himself later on. I think his name was Holler. He also ended up killing himself later on. And it was the weirdest thing because, you know, these are guys that were married and had families and had jobs and they were successful in their career, but it just catches back up to you. I don't know. You always gotta check in on your friends, check in on your battle buddies. And then part of finding purpose, I think at the same time I met your mother, and then you came along. And I think becoming a father kind of straightened me out, and I realized the seriousness of being a father and or being a parent. I didn't take the new responsibility lightly.
Okay, read the note out loud.
Dear Aaron Rosen, I miss you so much. I wanted to send you a gift that will make you very happy. See you soon. Love, Dad. Tell me you.
Okay, open it, rip it open. Is it Daddy?
One of the big problems, and I see it as tragic, are the numbers of suicides that veterans engage. Suicides happen when they perceive there is no end to the pain and no hope. And those pieces are most important to help to restore. Those two aspects, along with connecting them, helping them develop relationships with people who understand. Any veteran, any person who is feeling like they're only out is to end their life. Connect with people who can support, connect with people who can help, who can stand alongside and give them purpose.